So the first thing I used was these things called contour crayons. They're pretty fun because they really smear all over the place, and they came in 5 different colors when I bought the package. So the next thing I used turned out to be liquid lipstick. It claims to be honeymoon flavored, and it turned out to be pretty nice for like some shadows because it was just a touch darker than the contour crayons I had. This one was an eye crayon, and the cool thing was that it had a little blender on top. The only problem was that I didn't know how to sharpen it correctly. This one was called Molten Liquid Eyeshadow, and I thought that was pretty cool. It didn't really add to the drawing in any way, except for make the skin a little shinier. Here we have a contour lip liner, punch colored. And who would I be if I didn't ruin a perfectly good lipstick? This one is Cherry Frost. Of course, we've got some mascara. This one was actually the hardest to use just because of the design of the bottle. It really doesn't allow you to take a whole lot out at a time. This one I use the most. It's a palette with 88 eyeshadow colors, most of which are there, but some are missing because I got it from somebody who didn't want it anymore. I think it started giving their face allergic reactions because it was so old. And last but not least, all of the Q-tips. So I'm starting off just like I would anything else. I'm just drawing out the big shapes and lining everything up to start out with. And I'm doing this on a piece of gesso canvas. This is because I didn't want the oils to soak through a piece of paper. It would be like getting pizza stains on your napkins, and that's just pretty gross. So that's one reason for that. The other reason is that canvas has a little bit of a tooth to it, and what I mean by that is if I put powder on it, it won't really like slip off and smear away. So it'll kind of hold everything together nicely. I'm using the contour crayons mostly on the bottom just because they're kind of basic flat colors, which is good, I mean, I guess for contouring, but the skin has a little more complexity than that. So I put them as the first layer and found out that the eyeshadow actually stuck pretty well to it, with the canvas sort of being toothy and the contour crayon also being kind of sticky, so the powder really didn't move once I set it in there with the Q-tips. Then I started putting in some of the background, which in the painting is like totally black. This is what I use the mascara for. Now, never use mascara in this kind of way. It's just not worth it. I mean, it's great. It comes out with like a nice waterproof sort of finish, which I don't know how you'd get off your face, but I mean, it's great for the canvas because I didn't get to smear my hand through a bunch of black. But the way the bottle is designed, you really can't get a lot out at a time, which makes sense since you put it on your eyes and you don't want a lot to come out at a time. But it meant I had to dab really, really small amounts. What I think was actually the most challenging thing, though, was his turban, just because that's a whole lot of red. And for me, it's a lot harder to differentiate between shades of the same color than it is from other colors. So, for example, his eyes are definitely uh, blue, and like his cheeks are definitely kind of rosy, and his jacket's totally black with a little bit of brown. But it's a lot harder for me to separate lighter reds from darker reds, for example. And it's also harder to sort of work your materials around that because, as you can see, I was using like mostly that lipstick, and I had to figure out what other colors were going to give me those pinks and darker reds without sort of changing the color completely. Now, once we get to about here, that's where I start hitting my phase of doesn't really look different. What I mean by that is after I've put everything down, like all the base layers, and started getting it to where it mostly looks like that thing, I go back in and detail things.
just little bits here and there to sort of refine it, and it just starts looking like not much is changing. Although it is, and overall, you can tell.
I like to think that I have a couple phases through all my projects. Some of them last a little longer than others, but I personally love the beginning of a project. I love starting something new because it's so exciting and everything is just beginning, and that's where I can really see the most progress. The middle kind of stretches out for me because uh, that's kind of when you have to day by day kind of push yourself forward and make sure that you have a way of seeing your progress and feeling it. Otherwise, you sort of get stuck where you don't feel like you're actually making anything, even though you are. You've just forgotten how far you've come already. And then the last phase is sort of like light in the tunnel because you finally sort of see that you're about to be done, and that kind of pushes you forward and, um, you know, gets you to that finish line. If you're wondering about what person I'm painting right now, it's a copy of the painting by Jan van Eyck that is supposedly a self portrait. He was an early Netherlandish painter from the 1400s, and some of the things they some of the reasons they think it is a self portrait is because of the really hard stare he's giving the audience, which is kind of like saying, hey, look at me, this is me. And also because there's a little inscription on top of the original frame that says Als ik kan, which supposedly is a pun on his name because he's Van Eyck. So I think Ik and Ike are supposed to sound similar. And it's like saying as I can or as Ike can. Like nobody can paint like I can, which is kind of funny if you think about it. After a little bit of fact checking too, I learned that he's not actually wearing a turban. So my mistake for earlier, it's actually called a chaperon, which was sort of a hat slash scarf slash hood that was super popular at the time. At this point, my movements start slowing down a little bit, not in the video, but just in general with how I'm applying the paint, because it starts getting a little more detailed, and I have to start taking a step back and looking at, well, what's still not quite right, and what small changes do I have to make to get it quite right, or as right as I can. When there's a nose missing, there's a nose missing, but it gets sort of difficult towards the end to find out what you're lacking because you've already got most of the main shapes there. It's already sort of um, got that likeness to it, and now you're just going in and adding like the beauty spots, the freckles, the those extra little details that make it look like that person. At the same time, though, I think you have to sort of consider what's going to be best for your drawing. In this case, I'm doing a drawing of a painting, so the likeness has to be pretty similar just because, it's an artwork of an artwork that's sort of well known, so if it didn't quite look right, people would be able to tell. But in a different case, for example, if I was drawing a friend or a neighbor, not everybody knows who that is. So when I'm using them as a reference, I want to get their shapes right for my satisfaction and maybe for their satisfaction. But I don't have to go any further than that. I just have to make it a successful drawing or painting, right? So what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to look exactly like your reference because in the end when you put up your painting or give it to whoever you're giving it to, wherever it goes, people aren't going to compare what you worked from to what you have now. They're only going to see the final product. I think one reason I wanted to mention that is because by the end I started sort of having to make a decision because in the original painting there's a lot of detail, like super crazy amounts of detail. And I started realizing that the materials I was using limited that. So the Q-tips are great, but they couldn't nearly get all the edges and fine lines that the brush would in the painting. So I had to sort of take a step back and decide, okay, do I want to add more materials? Probably not, because this is what I've been using the whole time. I want to stick to this. Do I want to work with this fuzziness? Do I want to try something different? And I ended up deciding to work with um, sort of what the material was naturally good for, which is, sort of blurring things out and making things fuzzy. So I just kind of went with the overall fuzzy look and decided that's how my version of it was going to come out. So as you can see, I'm pretty much done by now. I'm just putting on the final touches. Or I guess another way of saying that is I'm just trying to figure out when to stop and exactly how much detail I want to have in this painting. I just want to close off with this quote that I've been thinking about from Ratatouille. At the very end of the movie, someone says, "In the past, I have made no secret of my disdain for Chef Cousteau's famous motto, 'Anyone can cook.' But I realize only now do I truly understand what he meant. Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere." And even if you haven't seen this movie, it's just something nice to think about because the materials you have don't make you what you are. Use whatever you have to be great.